I once gave a talk in New York to an audience of about 2 to 3,000 people in the television industry, and it was on the psychology of creativity. They were, as you can imagine, a very high energy, boisterous bunch. But I also knew they had exceptionally high rates of burnout due to chronically high stress and really punishing deadlines. I asked the audience members to raise their hand if they were happy to be average. About 10 hands went up. I then suggested that probably means that almost everyone in the room was, by that measure, not very happy. Well, they were certainly not happy with me at that point. Of course, this was something of a trick question that conflated what we are with what we aspire to be. And there's nothing wrong with aspiration, of course, but there's a lot wrong with believing you have to be above average in order to be happy. So today I'm discussing, among other things, the Lake Wobbegong effect. Now, as you may know or may not know, Lake Wobbegong is a fictional town created by Garrison Keillor as part of his famous long-standing radio show, A Prairie Home Companion. The ironic closing words of Keillor's show were always, well, that's the news from Lake Wobbegong, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. Of course, the truth is, all of us are pretty average on most things, but as a rule, we don't see it that way. Generally, we suffer from a sense of relative superiority, the so-called superiority bias, or as we'll call it here, the Lake Wobbegong effect. We have elevated views of ourselves on most things. For example, researchers have demonstrated this across many areas of self-evaluation, whether you're looking at cognitive tasks, driving ability, health, IQ, memory, popularity, relationship happiness, and my favourite, even immunity to all of these biases. People on average think they're better than they are. That is, unless of course they don't. Naturally, there are individual differences based on personality and life experience. Some people have got very low self-esteem, some have elevated self-esteem, but as a generalisation across all people, these biases are consistently found, maybe just not in you and me. But to make matters worse, in the age of digital media, we're constantly bombarded with the exceptional. We can literally watch exceptional feats and stories 24/7, and this can seriously distort what we take to be normal or average. We're confronted with impossible standards to emulate, be they athletic, physical, appearance, musicality, and so on. Not to mention the production values, the camera angles, the airbrushing, the retakes, and the fact that people have worked at it all their lives to make it look easy. We forget, or perhaps don't realise, that such performance is at the extreme end of the normal curve. And even if that person is talented, they've worked and worked and worked at it, often obsessively for years. Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code, is a revelation in this regard, as he examines world-class performers of all kinds. What they all have in common is deep practice. That is, continuous hard work, mental struggle, and sustained extreme attention. Most of these world's best didn't start out as the most talented, but they ended up as the most skilled. Now, almost everything we value is distributed on some normal curve, the bell curve, where most occurrences cluster around the 50th percentile. That is why, on average, we are average on most things. But the word average, at least in Australia, has come to mean no good. If you're feeling ill in response to an inquiry as to your health, we typically say, I'm feeling pretty average. Likewise, we describe someone else's bad behaviour as being really average. As my unfair question to the New York audience indicated, people feel as if they have to be above average in order to be okay. They need to have high status in the village, as evolutionary psychologists like to say. This creates a very pervasive ego trap, where we're constantly at risk of painful status loss when our exaggerated claims about self are revealed as just that. This ego trap causes untold suffering. So what is it? It's the gap between an internal self-evaluation and a higher evaluation of us that we think is circulating out there in the world. So, how can we be happy if we are, in fact, on average, pretty average? Unsurprisingly, it has to do with self-knowledge and self-acceptance. And speaking of self-knowledge, I'd like to unpack one of my favourite definitions of happiness. It comes from the evolutionary psychologist Dr. Doug Lisle. He says, happiness results from esteem, earned in the right way, from the people that matter. There's so much condensed in this sentence, and it's really worth unpacking. Firstly, that we do need esteem. So beware the person who says they don't care what people think. They're likely deluded, lying, or maybe sociopathic. Secondly, it needs to be earned in the right way. So ideally what we're working on should contribute, not subtract from the total good, but just as importantly, it needs to be done right. And what's this right mean? Well, as with deep practice, no corners are cut, fundamentals are identified and mastered, and our internal audience knows we've been diligent. So pride is the natural result as we recognise that we really actually deserve our success. Finally, we need to be discerning about whose esteem we take seriously. That is, the people that matter. But there is a problem. The world is full of pseudo-esteem, esteem from those who don't really know us. Think of likes and friends on social media or fans of elite performers. Think of your reputation or perhaps a rumour that's spreading about you. Reputation can be very, very valuable, but it's no foundation for solid self-esteem and identity because remember, these people don't actually know you. By contrast, we should value esteem from people who know us and whose knowledge, motives and judgment we trust. So this is hard because we're designed by nature to resonate to any esteem in the village. For example, we tend to feel the sting of criticism no matter the source. Likewise, we tend to glow whenever we're praised, even if the person doesn't know us well. So we have to get better at separating out the external esteem that's worth internalising. There's an obvious point here. We need to better know and to better accept ourselves. One of life's most important tasks is to recalibrate one's sense of self, always in the direction of who we actually are, what our actual skills and capabilities are at present. And we should also aspire to continuously improve. As with Carol Dweck's now famous distinction between fixed and growth mindsets, we should aspire to grow and develop, but most importantly, to focus on process and tasks rather than self and social comparison. By freeing yourself from impossible standards and exaggerated self-presentation, you have the possibility to relax. You can appreciate the simple things of life. You can measure yourself against your own continual improvement. You can value feedback from people that matter. You can be liberated from constant self-consciousness and social comparison. You can discover the unflappable happiness of being average.